Our first speaker this afternoon is Arlene Howe. She is a family member with lived experience and a member of Moms Stop the Harm Kelowna. She also sits on our Boost Steering Committee. Some of you may know Arlene. She's joined a couple of our Boost sessions in the past. So today, Arlene will be speaking to the things she didn't know but wished she had when supporting her loved one. This was identified as something that all of you would like to hear about, so that you can identify knowledge gaps and kind of those gaps in providing education and the appropriate resources and supports to families. I believe Arlene will also be talking to us a little bit about a peer-led support group that is run by Moms Stop the Harm. Anyways, I just want to welcome Arlene, and I believe Arlene is on the line. I did see her. So perfect. Thanks, Arlene. I will turn it over to you if you're ready.
Thank you. Hi, everybody. This is Stephen, my son. I'd like to start by telling you, of course, you know who I am, Arlene Howe. I'm a mom, a grandma, an artist, and a fierce advocate for people who use drugs. I strive to educate people I know and I don't know about addiction and what I know about addiction and drug harms in order to reduce the stigma and shame that shroud people who use drugs, and to teach about the toxic supply on our streets. I've been an active member of Moms Stop the Harm since 2016. And I hope you don't mind if I refer to my notes. I have a lot to say. And I hope it keeps you interested. Before I tell you my story and my beautiful son's story, I'd like to tell you a bit about the support groups that were just mentioned, that Moms Stop the Harm have created and support. We've got a support group for people who've lost someone to drug harms and substance use. The group that I facilitate is called Healing Hearts, and it's for people who have lost someone to substance use. We provide grievers with a platform to speak safely of their loved one, to share stories, their pain, how they're coping, and they absolutely feel heard and supported. We also have a group for people who have a loved one in the throes of addiction or substance use, and this group is called Holding Hope. Like Healing Hearts, people need a platform to speak with others in the same circumstances that they are living to address their pain, fears, and their coping mechanisms. They too feel comfortable, they feel like they heard, and they feel supported. So I can pass on the information of how to contact us to Angie, but if you have any clients or people that you think could benefit from our Healing Hearts or Holding Hope groups, please let us know. We believe that bearing witness to another person's pain and struggles is a key component to connection. It all becomes real when we recognize our shared humanity. So I've been asked to talk about Stephen and my personal perspective, experience, and knowledge in looking at the gaps in services that at that time were available to me or that I found for Stephen. So I lost him, first of all, to his addiction, and secondly, to a poisonous drug supply. Steve was 32 when he passed away on January 31st, 2015 from a pharmacologic toxicity. He had lethal amounts of fentanyl, methamphetamine, and cocaine in his system. Steve used to say to me, "Mom, I'm not going to die. Stop worrying. I know what I'm doing. I know my dealer." But he did die. Fentanyl-tainted drugs were just a whisper in the news when he died. He was an early casualty of this epidemic. We adopted Steve when he was 14 months old. He was considered a special needs child, they said, because of his age, not for any other reason other than that. He had a really tough start. He was seized from his birth mom at 2 months old. Both parents were street entrenched. His mom was into heroin and his dad into alcohol. At birth, an examination revealed that Stephen did not have fetal alcohol syndrome or any dependency on drugs. Over the years, however, we recognized that he was indeed on the spectrum. He had learning disabilities. He had issues. Steve entered into foster care on being taken from his mom. And in the 12 months before we adopted him, he had been placed in 2 different homes and had several unsuccessful supervised visits with his parents. We met Steve while he was in his last foster home and brought him home after 2 days of visiting him. We gave him a new name. We put him in a strange car and we took him to a new home. Imagine his confusion. We were strangers to him. His eyes were hollow and he was unemotional for the first 6 months with us. It took him that long to drop his guard, to trust, to bond with me. And when he did, I knew our bond would never be broken. We had a very strong bond, loved each other very much. It was 1983 when social services passed him along to us with the promise of follow-up. They said, oh no, we'll call you. We want to know how he's doing. They never called, ever. We never heard from them again. There were no supports given us and guides to raise our little traumatized boy. We had no idea what special care Stephen might need throughout his life. One seminar I was at, Gabor Mate told me that 80% of adopted kids turn to drugs. That's a pretty significant amount of children. So my first gap in the system is social services. I believe there needs to be a marriage between social services and local supports to aid the parents and the child on his lifelong commitment to better health. Kids at risk need to be identified early and pointed in the right direction. I fell in love with Steve immediately, though. Even before I met him, I saw a photo of him and I vowed to love and protect him forever. I recall, though, that was little Stevie. That was the first photo I saw of him. The social worker, after she showed me this photo, she said, you know, you can send him back. And that was probably the most horrific thing I'd ever heard, that you would give back a baby. But she said he was a busy boy, and if we didn't want to keep him, we could send him back like he was an old pair of jeans. I said that was never gonna happen, and it didn't. And as soon as I met this little firecracker, I knew he was mine and I was his. It was love at first sight. We were honest with Steve from the beginning and shared his history with him. We told him about his parents. I gave him his adoption records to read. He once told me that he was so grateful for the life he had with us, and that if he didn't have me, he would be on the streets and he would be dead by now. I believe that to be true. Steve was a challenging boy. He hit the floor running and he never stopped. He was a boisterous, funny, mischievous, daredevil boy. Steve was a driven and competitive athlete as he grew up, a brilliant carpenter and a motorcycle enthusiast. He was also a gregarious, vibrant, funny person. He was a large presence wherever he was. You knew exactly where he was in the room because he had a very loud, booming laugh and a terrific sense of humor. He was a risk taker. He loved challenge, and it fueled him. He also had major anger and rage issues and entered into short-term counseling at the age of 5. In fact, he strangled a little boy across the street and left fingerprints on his neck. So this was pretty serious stuff. He had a very couple of weeks was all we got with the counselor. And the counselor told Stephen to bite his pillow and scream into it to release his rage. That was it. Nothing else. Never saw the guy again. He never asked for follow-up. It was truly disappointing. Why did Stephen have rage? Like, why wasn't that addressed in the first place? His trauma, his fears, his confusion were never addressed. Although I continued to try and find services for him throughout his life, in the end, there was little to support him and us through his childhood, teen years, and in his young adult life. He dealt with it by escaping and coping in a world of multiple drugs. So this would be my second gap. My second gap is mental health for young people. We need to increase our youth support. We need more collaboration between services, and for referrals to other agencies if what we are doing in our groups with our youth isn't satisfying a need. We need to move them on to another group, and we need to communicate with each other. This is absolutely essential in harm reduction. I know now we have the Foundry and we have the Bridge Youth Treatment Center, which I absolutely support 100%, both of them. I think it's fantastic, but they're only two agencies. This needs to be a priority as we move across for drug prevention. At 14, Steve's experimentation with drugs began. His behavior changed. He became much more rebellious, combative. He got into trouble. We sent him away to a Christian private school where he learned how to use needles. From that time to his death, he binged. His romance with substance use consumed half of his life. He used whatever he needed to conquer the high highs and the low lows. He would often go out for a pack of smokes and not return for days. No one knew where he was. He would return homesick. I would sit with him through his delirium, his violent shakes, his sweats and vomiting. It was certainly, I had no resources to know what to do. He would be okay for a while after he detoxed, have a few great months, but it never lasted. He would retreat back into his dark world, pardon me, when things went bad in his life. It was his coping mechanism. I recognized I could not change his path. I had no idea how. So I just continued to support him as best I could. This would be my third gap. First of all, that parents, and I know a lot of parents who have detoxed their children, we have no idea how this could be a dangerous thing to do. No idea at all. We need services in place to support immediate detox and education to loved ones. We need to help one another in understanding where to go, who to talk to. We need groups supporting parents, and we need a less complex system of navigation. When you're in a panic and your child is sick or out of control, and I'm sure many of you can relate to this, it's really hard to know, where do I look? Where do I look? Who do I call? I've often thought that something as simple as just having an 811 or a 3-digit hotline should be initiated just for substance use, period. And that navigation system would be so much easier for parents and not a painstaking and frustrating path. We could post these visual messages all throughout Ontario Health Authority, have them at every bus stop, everywhere, put them on the news, little flashcards at the bottom. So that's my third gap. Now, keep in mind that when Stephen was young, sadly, the message at that time was, don't enable him, don't give him money, don't support him, kick him out. No one understood the nature of addiction at that time. We all thought it was a choice and people could quit whenever they wanted to. We expected our kids to take responsibility for their actions. I believe we only created more damage to their already frail self-esteem. So that would be my fourth gap. In supporting children, youth, and young adults, the be cruel to be kind message backfired badly and did more harm than good in the end. Parents need to be counseled in understanding that negative narratives and the harm that those kind of narratives can do to your child. If we can engage in people to change habits, give them new tools to change their habits and behaviors and beliefs that have been ingrained in them. They got taught as well with tough love. I did, probably many of you did too, but it doesn't seem to be what we do anymore. We need to have supportive messages of kindness and love for our children. Steve went on to several rehabs. He found God. He went to NA. He went to AA. with fierce determination to change. His trauma and fears were never resolved, nor deeply or fully investigated. The Pandora box was never opened. So that's my fifth gap. I believe we need vigorous counseling support to open Pandora boxes. These are not going to be easily accessible, but if we have people in charge of, like people who know how to do that, how to open people up, in healing, perhaps a new life could be found. I was recently at the Bridges new detox and transitional housing opening. It's a beautiful and healing place. It's clean, it smells good, it's beautiful. Steve could have detoxed. He could have gone on to OAT. He could have transitioned into a new life. I also recently spoke with OAT practitioners. In listening to their presentations, I've come to understand and realize that if Stephen's craving had been addressed and stabilized, if his mental health issues had been addressed, if he had been supported by a professional counselor, he could be free from the chains of his substance use disorder. Gap number 6. We've not found any way to reach the population of men who, like Stephen, use alone and die alone. Many people are professionals, people supporting family, people who hide their drug use and want anonymity. Stigma and shame truly keep them reaching for an illicit supply. The loaded pistol just continues to be passed along. OAT is safe supply. We need to find a way to engage these people. We need to ensure their anonymity. We need to deliver them a safe supply. It is the only way that we're going to keep people alive. Steve was one of the young men who are dying at an alarming rate in our city, province, and country. Many people assume that it is only the street entrenched that are impacted. And so, people have stigma around that. They don't think about it being you or me or someone who works with them or a friend. People don't think that way. We have to start changing our thinking about this. By December of 2014, Steve's entire life was shattered. He was more entrenched in his substance use. He was declining. He was out of control. He was on probation. And he was in deep trouble. It was incredibly painful not to be able to save him from drowning. He was a child I vowed to protect for his entire life. And I couldn't stop what was happening. He lost his girlfriend in December of 2014. His girlfriend walked away. The few belongings that he hadn't pawned, were shoved into his truck that would be repossessed on his death. He could not find sanctuary with friends anymore and ended up in the seedier side of Edmonton. I heard from him shortly before he died. He said that he loved me. He wanted to come home and start over. He said, "Mom, you didn't raise a loser, and I'm going to get my shit together." And he believed he would. He really did. He used alone, and he died alone in a stranger's bathtub. In the city, his mother walked in, and on the same streets she walked when she was carrying him. And the last picture that you see is Stephen 2 days before he died. And this is the hollow little baby that I saw. Those eyes are hollow. And that's what he looked like when he was a baby and I brought him home. So it came full circle. And I'm sorry, it's been 8 years. It doesn't kind of change anything. I mean, honestly, my grief is not as raw as it was, but it surely remains. Thank you for listening to me. And I hope that what I said has a little bit of impact on how you think about practicing and supporting people and families. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it very much.
Thank you so much, Arlene. I can imagine, it's never easy to share that story. Um, I myself was getting a little bit emotional, but we just want to thank you for joining and sharing.
Thank you. I wish you guys the best of luck. You're absolutely amazing, all of you. It's such a wonderful place to be where you are in the world right now and trying to save people and change policies. Thank you for the work that you do.